Ladies and gentlemen, this is White Lightning 777 coming back at you again. Another video on Ukraine and the newest Israeli war. That's that old song, the one that kids always sing wrong, the one that should say there's a bomb in Gilead, but kids always say there is a bomb in Gilead. Well, it turns out that, from the mouths of infants comes the truth. Turns out that's the case. There are several developments that have occurred. And I'll get into those and my conclusions. There's this dispute between a channel I like, the enforcer who does the enforcer Ukraine. That he does the news. He also does fundraisers for the channel during the week, and on Sundays he does a special. He does charity work, and we'll give it to groups like United 24, Razum of Ukraine, or Doctors Without Borders, or whatever. I mean, before you give to a charity like that, and his is no exception, before you give them money, pull up another window on your computer or your phone and actually research what that charity is and make sure you think it's okay, and obviously don't give away more than you can afford to lose. But they do a lot of good work, and they've raised about 1.2 million. For some reason, they try, even though personally they're right wing and personally they're MAGA people or whatever, or they're at least Republicans. This other individual, Anthony Mercado, who runs another channel, Mercado Media, doesn't keep politics out of it. This guy is woke politics first, Ukraine distant second. He even went over there and he got him a couple of trucks. But if you've raised money for Ukraine to buy them trucks, do you think Ukrainians are headhunters in the middle of the jungle? You think you couldn't just hire a Ukrainian to go and drive the trucks? Why did you have to fly over there? Don't you think an American is a target? If you're an American and you're giving them aid in their territory, there's probably an Iskander missile with your name on it. You're putting a target on yourself and others, and therefore you're a threat to everyone around you because Russia kills civilians. And if you're providing equipment to their army, you're arguably a lawful combatant. Although, Geneva Conventions notwithstanding, not that the orcs respect that. And this idiot has even resorted to threats of violence, apparently, against these enforcer people. The first channel, I've seen this guy Mercado's channel. I've seen him discuss and allude to the consumption of drugs, typically marijuana. I've also seen him display firearms on his channel. Okay, now I've done a very few videos on firearms that were topical. I think I did one on the how to place a bayonet on a Zastava M76 after somebody in AK files in the AK forum, specifically was hopelessly confused, and they needed help, and I showed them how to do that. I do very few videos on those. But, he's discussed this. He's using drugs, and he's also, and again, I'm not a psychiatrist. I do have friends and family and some coworkers with mental health issues, and I know what their meds are, and I know what their diagnosis is, and this guy, Mercado, does display behaviors that bear a remarkable resemblance to Asperger's syndrome, like the autism spectrum and paranoia, PTSD, whatever, and signs of head injuries. Again, what I've seen, to me, invokes that and resembles that. I'm not diagnosing him. I'm not saying he has it or he doesn't have it. I'm just saying he looks like to me, he resembles several people in my life who have had these issues. Needless to say, drugs, mental illness, or suspected mental illness, and guns don't mix. this person should get stabilized. If he has a mental illness, if he's just eccentric and looks weird, a little bit weird, that's fine. Nothing wrong with being weird. It's not a risk factor. But the drug usage and the guns are definitely risk factors. And now he's gotten 3 copyright strikes for stealing content, which on YouTube, they come down real hard on that. You know, there are topics that you can't talk about on YouTube. We all know what they are, and copyrighted stuff is one of them. I had one thing on my channel. I thought it was just entertainment, that it was free to use to the public. It didn't have any watermarks or any indications of copyright, and I accidentally had a copyright strike. I didn't mean it. I just thought, I didn't think it was, because the person never said it was copyrighted. Okay, but I guess the moral of that story is just assume the answer is yes. So, the person, and my concern, I am a security guard. I do work. My current post is at a hospital in the area, around the area where I live. It's fairly close to home. It's a smaller hospital. Doesn't even have a psych ward, but we do get psych patients, and sometimes we have to deal with people that are unstable or violent, or people that just, they're distraught. They just lost a family member or whatever. So, I deal with the mentally unstable on a fairly frequent basis. When people have a life-changing event, like they lose a job or their channel or fame or whatever, that does elevate them, in my professional opinion, as a security guard, as a protective security officer, operating within a license within the state of Maryland, within the scope of my training, expertise, previous experience, and common sense and gut intuition, that getting this guy Mercado's channel off the air will elevate him to a higher risk factor for some kind of act of violence, and maybe even at the extreme end, murder, suicide, although I hope not. So I kind of urge the enforcer guys to be a little bit careful. The threats of violence and stuff like, and the possible instability are far more significant issues than copywriting a few minutes of video. Okay, I don't even know if people may use my videos. I don't even know if people copyright strike it. I don't even know if people have used my videos. I'm a small channel. It would probably help my channel if they did. I would just ask that they cite it. I'd strike them. I'd pull the strike back and ask that they just ask for credit. Put the link in the description. Okay, or hit a like or subscribe. I don't even really ask people to like and subscribe very much. But what are my conclusions? As far as the Ukraine war goes, my conclusions are unchanged. We should have given them what they needed within 90 days of the invasion. The war would be over by now. It was obvious that they need tanks, that they need modern fighter planes. When we look, and the interesting thing is the Israel war with Hamas, Israel has all the stuff Ukraine should have had. And you will see that the Israelis are very quickly recapturing land, and very quickly there, and they will probably exterminate Hamas within a matter of days. Ukraine should get those fighter planes. They should get 100 F-16s and 100 Abrams tanks. Doesn't matter what kind. Doesn't make a damn bit of difference which ones, as long as they run. And they got spare parts for them. And the munitions for them, and then try and go from there and see what happens. And, throw in a couple of A-10s, some ATACMs, and some Tomahawk cruise missiles as well. Better with to blow up the Kerch Bridge in the Kremlin. My conclusions in terms of both situations are very similar. The leadership has to pay. The elites, the rich, money-soaked, decadent, little whoremongers with their underage girls, golden sinks, and silver diamond-encrusted spoons in their mouth have to pay the price. They need to literally get their legs broken. And if you catch one of these elite people, burn them at the stake. or impale them, or put them in front of a firing squad, make a big show of their execution. Okay? These kinds of wars are launched by people with deeply padded couches, far, far nicer than any furniture in my house. Okay? Putin's ridiculous stretch Mercedes limo should be blown up. If you hate the West, why don't you drive a stretch Lada? Or why don't you actually build a decent hot rod in Russia? He runs around in a Mercedes that's a stretch limo Mercedes, yelling about Nazis in Ukraine despite the fact that they elected a Jewish president. Something that, by the way, hasn't had Russia. The last Jew they had running, it was Lenin, the USSR. He really didn't do that. Kind of thumbs down on communism. Okay. Zelensky's one of the good ones. Kill the leaders. As far as Gaza goes, it's obvious there are no civilians in Gaza. Given the human wave attack from such a small area, it's basically, you can be assured that well in excess of 99% of the people living there are terrorists that were radicalized by this death cult that's been there for decades. On the West Bank, the people voted for Fatah, which is a much more moderate Muslim type of thing. They're still not very friendly. They're still somewhat anti-Semitic, somewhat problematic, but they at least will go through the motions of minimally cooperating with their neighbors. This group, Hamas, and the other one, Hezbollah, their big brother group, they don't. They don't. The only thing to do with Gaza is to go Dresden style on them, or the fire bombings of Tokyo on them. Not one building should be left upon another. The entire area should be stripped of all featherless bipeds. Not one stone should lie upon another. And the United States probably should militarily intervene. We have bombers and things Israel doesn't have, and Israel has a lot of our American weapons. They don't have B-52s, they don't have B-1s, or at least not too many of them, or at least they don't admit to having them. But, they need like Moabs and, fuel air bombs, napalm, things like that. That whole area should be razed to the ground. You might ask, what about hostages? That Hamas has taken hostages. Those hostages have no more hope of life than somebody in Auschwitz or, Bergen-Belsen or Sobibor or any other camp. And even after the war, after World War II, by the way, many of the inmates in the camp said, why didn't you bomb us? We were being killed. We'd have been better off bombed. These people are being tortured to death, or possibly, if they're psychologically susceptible, they're being sucked in and brainwashed, and they'll end up like what Charles Manson did with Squeaky Fromm and end up being turned into terrorists themselves. You may not want to get them back, is what I'm saying. Why take the chance? Israel has a question. They have the technology, they have the brains, but the question is, do they have the guts? Are the Israelis too squeamish to do what obviously needs to be done? Take these barbarians and destroy them. The world is not big enough for the civilized world and the barbarian mutant horde to live side by side. One side will win or the other will win. And I choose our side. I choose the civilized world. If you're with the barbarians, if you think that Putin is doing the right thing, or there's bioweapon labs in Ukraine, or the Jews did 9/11, or we live in a racist country, or that, the oil companies want to kill us all with global warming and turn the world to Venus, or some more warped ancient myth that involves the world everything going up in flames, you're not civilized. You're a barbarian. Get the fuck out of my country. You don't belong here. Give up your citizenship. Give up your place here to somebody who is able and willing and eager to be assimilated, who will be a good citizen, because you're a bad citizen. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. If you are siding with barbarians, claiming to be somehow nominally right-wing, does not excuse the fact that you are committing sedition against your country, which, by the way, is a federal crime. So is misprision of treason. Those are crimes. The laws may not be enforced properly. Fine. And Biden giving $6 billion to Iran on September 11th, when 3,000 Americans died, to ransom a few foolish people who were taken hostage. I mean, I guess $6 billion translates into 5,000 rockets and some paragliders, and you know, we can see what $6 billion does. I mean, Iran is a third world country. Stuff's cheap over there. Weapons are cheap over there. $6 billion goes a long way over there. You can even just throw, pocket change. I mean, they probably didn't even, I don't even think this Hamas group, they probably just gave them, $50 or $60 million. This attack probably doesn't cost that much money. They still, of course, like Putin, they steal it for themselves. They keep it for themselves. Iran's capital needs to go away. Iran's parliament needs to go away. Iran's hydroelectric jams and electricity needs to go away. Plumbing needs to go away. See, electricity, water, plumbing, internet, those things are for civilized people only, not barbarians. Barbarians should squat in the filth and live in caves so that they don't bother anyone else. And those who bite the hand that feed them should have that hand chopped off. In fact, they should have their head chopped off as well. Tolerance for barbarism is barbarism. And those who simp for barbarians, who apologize for barbarians, who apologize for the poor suffering Palestinians, who are so violent and so crazy that no other Islamic country on earth wants them. You think if the Saudis, don't you think the Saudis want cheap labor and household help and all these other Islamic countries? There's actually an obligation that if Muslims are oppressed, that the ones who are oppressed should be helped by those who are fortunate. I mean, there's sort of philanthropy part of the Islamic religion when practiced correctly and not malpracticed. Well, even other Muslim countries don't want them. But think about that. If somebody's exiled from their community, you don't want them. If you are dealing, let's say, with dogs, okay, and you have dogs outside and you're playing with the dogs or feeding them, and one dog is ostracized and chased out of the pack by the other dogs, that's the one that's rabid. That's the one that's going to kill you and your family, and you don't want to take it in. Okay? Ever read The Snake? Poem by Donald Trump? I mean, there was a blues song before Donald Trump took it, by the way. You can look at the actual, it's an old blues song. I'm sure if the original author is known or not. I'd have to do the research for that. Sort of a tangent that one goes off to when doing these videos. But the fact is, Slava Ukraine, Gaza delenda est. Long live the Republic. And barbarian scum will be excised from the civilized world. The fact is, if you have theocratic Russian orcs invading Ukraine, or you have theocratic terrorists from Gaza going to Israel, we let them get too close. The buffer zone just wasn't big enough. The walls weren't high enough. And the only way the civilized world loses these wars is if the civilized world becomes too squeamish to act upon the basic and guttural human instinct that we all have towards collective self-preservation. The barbarians bring it upon themselves. They should either acquire civilized behavior, assimilate, separate, or die. Better off, they're better off dead anyways. Anyway, long live the Republic. This is White Lightning 777, signing out.